All right, bring it on in the college football picks and preview show here at Beef Up Front on Pick Swap Media. Ryan Coyle, Joe Kmetz back for our weekly show. Brought Nick McClay onto the channel as well. Did a deep dive on college football with him. Usually him and I, but this is just such a big week, Joe. I figured, talk everything with Nick, and then me and you are going to focus down on our top 5 games of the week. And then we have a great G5 game this week, maybe potential playoff decider. So many great games, not able to fit all of them into the big 5, but plenty of action to talk about. Really big week here in college football. Upsetting to say, though, we're about halfway down the regular season already, Joe.
It does suck to already say that we're at week 7. This week is like the midway week because you have the 14 regular season weeks, week 15, Army, Navy. Well, week 14 is actually like conference title week. So in reality, you really are sitting on like the halfway point, which is crazy how quick it always comes. We talk about it all the time. But it felt like we were just breaking down Farmageddon over in Ireland. And now here we are. We have a bunch of great conference games, a bunch of awesome mid-season matchups. October, you're really getting into like the meat and potatoes of football season. Got some really exciting games. You're really starting to see who's legit, who's not legit. But I'm really looking forward to this week of games. Let's dive right into it.
Yeah, like you said, like looking at the schedule at the beginning of the year, like I probably wouldn't have penciled this in as one of the go-to weeks. I mean, definitely there's some good matchups, but like Indiana, I don't think we were expecting them to be as great as they are. Missouri, I think they're one of the surprises of the year, sitting here at 5-0 as they host Alabama, who's playing some really good football right now. Arizona State, Utah was definitely a game we had highlighted. I thought coming into the year, the top 2 teams in the Big 12, Texas Tech, I think has emerged as kind of the leader there. But 6 really good games to touch on this weekend. We don't even have Oklahoma, Texas in our top 5 games of the week, plus our G5 game. So that goes to show you how many great games we have on Saturday. It should be an exciting weekend of college football. And starting today, recording this on Wednesday, 49 straight days of football. I think we got 2 games on tonight. We got games Thursday. We got games Friday. Football season full swing for sure now. MLB playoffs in the middle of as well, but football is really starting to fully kind of take that center stage here as we get into the thick of things with the NFL and college. So exciting few months ahead. But let's start with our G5 game of the week, a potential playoff decider. I was saying with McClay too, Joe, I'm not sure if you agree, but I think this year that playoff team for the G5 representative is going to be coming from the American. You can pick South Florida, you could pick North Texas, you could pick Tulane, you could pick Navy even, Memphis even. Hell, there's 5 potential teams there, I think, in the mix. So that's going to make for a really exciting American conference down the stretch. But we got number 24 South Florida at 4-1. Own wins over Florida, own wins over Boise State. Got their ass beat by Miami, but that is what it is. Miami, as we know, has looked pretty good to start the season so far. They'll be traveling to North Texas, though, 5-0. Really high total in this game, 67.5. North Texas is a 1.5-point favorite at home. Friday night, 7:30 on ESPN2, Joe. Can the Mean Green pull this one off?
I want to say yes. I saw on Twitter, their president already said that the school is closing at 12 p.m. on Friday so that fans can get out to the game, students can get out to the game. It's going to be a really great day out there in Denton, Texas. Unfortunately, I'm going with USF here. I just think they're the better team. I think USF is legit. I think USF might put themselves in a position to potentially be at talk about in at large bid conversations. That win over Florida was pretty big. That win over Boise State is still pretty big, as Boise State is still one of the better, if not best teams in the Mountain West right now. And I'm going with Byron Brown and the South Florida Bulls, 31-28. I'll take them to cover the 1.5. I'm going to go with the under. I feel like it's a lot of points. I know both teams can score. So, but I just think 6-7 is a high amount of points, especially for 2 teams that are this good. I think the defenses will show up a little bit. But that being said, I'm going with the USF Bulls to keep this thing rolling. They're a top 25 team for a reason. But that being said, if North Texas pulls this one off, they avoid Memphis in the regular season, they avoid Tulane in the regular season, and they host Navy in a couple of weeks. So if you put those 2 together and you look at the rest of their schedule, there's really not a lot of games there that scare you. If you're North Texas, you could potentially be looking at, if they win this game, a 12-0 team heading into conference championship weekend.
Hey, they got to play the mighty Temple Owls at the end of the season as well. So
It's true.
let's not pencil them in quite yet. Our Owls have looked tough, but yeah, an exciting one here. I'm gonna ride with South Florida though. I think the way that they've played in the non-conference, proving that they could beat a pretty solid Boise State team that'll probably still win the Mountain West, a Florida team that is starting to look alive now, and then Miami. Obviously, that was a down game for that South Florida team. But this is still a situation where everything that they want is still in front of them. Miami has a dynamic quarterback, South Florida has a dynamic quarterback here, maybe even the best quarterback in the entire group of five there in Byron Brown. Alex Golish is a mastermind offensive play caller. He's going to be a guy, I think, that is in the mix for some of these big jobs that could be opening up this season, maybe even at Florida, if he does want to potentially go there if they don't poach someone from a bigger school. But this is a South Florida team that if you haven't watched them yet, they're fun. They don't really do that many down the field plays, but they have so much speed kind of going side to side. They beat you that way. Having watched them a handful of times so far this season. So this will be a fun watch. Both teams can put up some points. I'm going to go for the over of 67.5. Fun thing to root for in that one. But I am going to take South Florida on the roads 37-31, win that one outright. All right, let's go to Saturday. We go to the Big Ten first. Number 1, Ohio State at number 17, Illinois for a noon kick on Fox. Ohio State's a 14.5-point favorite, over under sitting at 50.5, Joe. Ohio State has looked as good as they did down the stretch last year. And this is with a whole batch kind of new players on the defensive side, new quarterback. I think they haven't even hit their stride yet.
Yeah, I really like this Ohio State team. I think they're going to win the game. However, I'm going to go with Illinois to cover that 14.5. So I'm going to go Ohio State 27, Illinois 17. I will take Illinois plus the 14.5 here. I'm going to go with the under of 50.5. This is still a massive game. We were kind of talking about a couple weeks ago when Ohio State had to go to Washington. Now they ended up winning that game. They ended up, I believe, covering as well. But I think Illinois will keep this one close. We saw them bounce back against USC. They won at Purdue. They've seemed to kind of righted the ship a little bit after that embarrassing loss to Indiana. And I will say, in terms of road tests, I think Illinois is a much better team than Washington. So I think this is really, really interesting for Ohio State. I also think this is a good kind of warm up for later in the year. They do have to go to Michigan to end the season still. That game is looming back there. Because besides that, I mean, they go to Wisconsin, who has been just such a disappointment this year. And Purdue is Purdue. They host Penn State, then they host UCLA and Rutgers. I know UCLA just beat Penn State, but I think that just says more about where Penn State's at right now. That being said, I'm going to go with Ohio State here, going on the road. I will say Julian Sand did impress me at Washington. I do think Illinois is a little bit of a different animal. I think they're definitely a step up in competition. I think this will be a very close game late. I think Ohio State will score a touchdown and kind of put this game out of reach. This is going to be, though, like an old school kind of ugly win. I don't think Ohio State's going to be running up and down the field like they were against Minnesota. I think this one will stay within the 14.5.
I think Ohio State has been head and shoulders the best team in the country this season. And as I said, too, I don't think they've even hit their stride yet with a young quarterback in Julian saying they have a couple of times a game where they're like, all right, let it loose, kid. And he shows you really what he can do and why he's a former 5-star recruit. Throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith, throwing the ball to Cardinal Tate. Those guys might even be not just the best duo in the country, but the best first and second best receivers in the country. Those guys are unreal. One of those situations where you can just be like, all right, let's get this guy the ball and something good is going to happen. It's as simple as that. And then that defense. I was very low on Matt Patricia being the hire there. I thought they could have definitely done better, but he's worked wonders with that defense. And sure, they are as talented as any group in the country, but he's came in and he's really confused some other teams. So this is a big test for him as a coordinator, I think, against probably the best quarterback that he's faced thus far. Arch Manning, as we know, hasn't amounted to much. But Luke Altmaier, I think, is a big test for Matt Patricia and this defense. He's been awesome this year, over 1,000 yards passing, had nearly 400 passing yards last week against Purdue. And then he has no interceptions on the season. He's done a really good job of taking care of the football. If Illinois and Luke Altmaier can keep care of the football, take care of the football in this matchup, they're going to have a chance at the end, I think. They're going to be kind of fighting in there. Maybe as they head, middle of the third quarter, you're still kind of hanging in there thinking they have a chance. But I just think this Ohio State team is just a little bit too much on talent on paper, they're more talented. I think they have a better coaching staff, top to bottom. They kind of check all the boxes above this Illinois team. So I think Illinois is going to hang around, but I do think Ohio State kind of puts it on them a little bit late and poses that will. Give me 31-14 Ohio State. So Ohio State minus 14.5, under 50.5 there. All right, staying at noon, we go to ABC now for number 8 Alabama, 4-1 at number 14 Mizzou, who's 5-0. Bama's a 3.5-point favorite. Over under is 53.5. Joe, Mizzou, I think they're one of the least talked about teams in college football right now, and it's time to put some respect on their name.
Yeah, cool. I'd have to agree, and I'm actually going to be doing just that. I'm going Mizzou 38, Bama 33. I will take Mizzou plus the 3.5. I'm going to take the over of 53.5. I've been I kind of alluded to it last week with Bama, but you're coming off of two massive wins. You beat Georgia at their place, nationally televised game. Everyone's going crazy talking about how good you are. Then you come home and take on Vanderbilt in a game that to that program meant a lot. Vandy upset them last year. Vandy was riding real, real high. A lot of people, Diego Pavia was talking a lot of smack, which is deserved. Bama looked a little bit wobbly. They lost to them last year. They haven't looked great. I know they beat Georgia, but that Florida State loss is still on the schedule. But that being said, you're once again sitting in a spot. You're at Mizzou now, and then you got to come home next week and play Tennessee in the third Saturday in October, another big rivalry game. I just think they're due for a slip up. Even a high caliber team such as Bama, this isn't the Saban Bama where they were so much head and shoulders better than the rest of the SEC. I think now that gap is closed a little bit, and I think they're definitely vulnerable to an upset. That's not saying that Ty Simpson hasn't been awesome this year, because he has. I really love Bo Pabula and Mizzou. I think Mizzou is going to pull off the upset here at home. I think Bama's due for another loss at some point. And if people want to call me crazy, people say I don't know ball, that's fine. But last year, if you would have thought Bama was going to drop that game at Oklahoma, Bama ended up losing 3 games last year. They missed the playoffs. I think they're due for at least one more loss, because I think nowadays, especially in the SEC, you're going to probably walk into the conference championship weekend carrying 2 losses. I don't know how many more undefeated teams we're going to get down the line unless you get really lucky with your schedule in the preseason. So I'm going to go with Mizzou here to pull off the upset, 38-33. I love the over, and I'm definitely going to take Mizzou plus 3.5.
Yeah, to back up your pick there of that potentially happening, Eli Drinkowitz, Joe, has been awesome in this spot as a home underdog. 9-3 against the spread as a home underdog since he became the head coach at Mizzou in 2020. You're giving them the points here at home. I think that's a pretty damn good pick by you. But as Lee Corso once said, not so fast, my friend. I'm going with the Crimson Tide in this one. I think since that Florida State game, you can make an argument that they're right up there with Ohio State and with Oregon as potentially the best team in the country. Ty Simpson's been balling, and he wasn't even that bad in that first game. Their offensive line was just destroyed in that one, and Florida State's defensive line just took it to work, and Ty Simpson really didn't have any time to throw. Now this offense, I feel like, has kind of really settled in. That game was such a wake-up call for that team, and to be able to go to Georgia and win that game, to be able to knock off this Vandy team that was a little bit of a thorn in their side last year. And as you said, Diego was talking all that smack this offseason. That was a big spot for Alabama to show up in. Ryan Williams is waking up. Kalen DeBoer, it seems like, is starting to get figured out. Ryan Grubb is settled in as the offensive coordinator. I think Bama's rolling, Joe, and I think they're starting to prove themselves as the best team in the SEC. If you're the best team in the SEC, you go to Mizzou and you find a way to win this game. I like Alabama 38-31, so Bama minus 3.5. Give me the over of 53.5 as well. All right, let's head out west now for the college game day game of the week. Number 7, Indiana at 5-0 goes to number 3, Oregon, who's also 5-0. 3:30 kick on CBS. Oregon 7.5-point favorite here, over under 55.5.
I am going to go with Oregon here, and I think Oregon wins big. I'm going Oregon 45, Indiana 28. I'll take the Ducks minus 7.5. I'm going to go with the over here. I think Oregon is going to have their way with Indiana. That's not to say that Indiana isn't a good team, but I think we're putting an awful lot of weight on that blowout of Illinois at home than we should be. Their other games are they beat Indiana State, Kennesaw State, and Old Dominion. They won at Iowa in an obvious letdown spot. They won 20-15. If it wasn't for that safety at the end of the game, they would have covered that spread, but I believe it was 6.5. I will say this is going to be really interesting though for the Heisman race because you have Mendoza and Moore going at it against each other. Which in Connecticut I can't check Heisman odds because we're a dumb state. But I believe right now if they're not the two favorites, Coyle, they got to be top five for the Heisman right now. So I really think this is going to be a fascinating game. However, I just think Oregon is the better team. I think Oregon is legit. I think winning at Penn State in the whiteout, having Penn State come back, force overtime, and you still seal the deal in double OT. Who knows about Penn State going full? And Penn State, we might look back and be like, well, you know what? Maybe that wasn't as impressive of a win as I thought. But Oregon being at home here at 3:30, Indiana, going across the country, even though it's going to be earlier local time there, we've still kind of seen it now with the Big Ten with all these cross country matchups. If you're going from away from your time zone and you're having to take all that travel, those long flights, I think it affects you. So that being said, I'm going with Oregon here to get a big win at home.
I like Oregon too, Joe. I said at the beginning, I think them and Ohio State, it's not really that shocking of a statement, but I think that they've been the best two teams in the country, and it's not going to surprise me if we look up in a few months and that's the Big Ten title game, but also the national championship game. I think Dante Moore has been more than what anyone could expect out of him during his time as the Oregon quarterback, and this was supposed to be kind of like a rebuild year, and they're going out there winning at Penn State in that tough environment. Got a bunch of young guys on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball balling out. Their one running backs averaging like 10 yards a carry. I think I saw this is a high-flying, high-powered Oregon team. So I really like the over in this one, and I like them to cover as well. I think Indiana is a really good team, but I just still think kind of until proven otherwise when they have to play these big boys, whether it's in Ohio State, whether it's in Oregon. Last year we saw it with Notre Dame. I still think that they're a little bit of a notch below. And Fernando Mendoza, maybe he's the guy that changes that. Maybe Rourke just wasn't the guy to get this team over the top. But if Fernando Mendoza is supposed to be one of the top NFL draft prospects coming up this year, supposed to be maybe the top quarterback selected off the board, you go out there and you have a competitive game in this one. You give yourself a chance. But Oregon, this is going to be a really tough environment to go into. I think Indiana's kind of walking into a bit of a buzzsaw in this matchup. So give me Oregon to win 41-30. So Oregon minus 7.5 and over 55.5 as well. All right, let's go. Stay in the Big Ten. We go to the nightcap now, though. Number 15, Michigan at 4-1. They'll be going to USC, who's also 4-1. 7:30 kick on NBC. USC 2.5-point favorite. Over under sitting there at 57.5. Joe.
So I am going with USC here, 28-20. I'll take a minus 2.5 at home. I'm going to go with the under of 57.5. I know Michigan's ranked 15th in the country. I know they're sitting there at 4-1, but there's something, I don't know. I'm not fully bought all the way in. Maybe it's the fact that Bryce Underwood's still a freshman and he still shows at times, that he looks like a freshman. 24-10 over Wisconsin isn't something that I'm really going to go around bragging about. They lost to Oklahoma on the road, who is by far the best team on their schedule so far. They survived against Nebraska. I just really am not fully bought into this team. I think USC being at home last year, Michigan had the big upset in the big house. So that being said, I'm going with USC here at home. I think Lincoln Riley will get a signature Big Ten win, and I think USC will kind of still be hanging around in the mix because they got Notre Dame next week, which we'll probably, especially if they win, probably be talking about USC again next week. Then after that, they have a game at Nebraska, but then they have a big one late in the year at Oregon. But who knows? USC might, if they win this game, might be hanging around and be in, potential conversation for sneaking into the Big Ten title game if they could pull off the upset at Oregon later in the year. So I think they're going to win this game. I'm going 28-20. I guess I'm not fully bought in on Michigan.
I'm going with USC at home here as well, Joe. Like you said, I'm not fully bought in this Michigan team, but if Michigan does get past this game with a win, Joe, that schedule going forward is very doable. And I think there's a very legit path for Michigan to make it to the college football playoff. I think that they'll probably walk into that. If they walk out of USC with a win, I think that they walk into that Ohio State game with a 10-1 record because you touched on it. At USC, this week versus Washington, at Michigan State, versus Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland. There's no ranked teams left on the schedule the rest of the way. So they might not be one of the best 12 teams in college football, but that schedule is going to kind of help them get there. So huge game for this Michigan team. I think if they find a way to lose this one, and then obviously if they lose that last game against Ohio State, sit at 9-3, they're not going to be going to the college football playoff with this body of work. But if they win this one, and your only two losses on the year are Oklahoma and Ohio State, and we know that they have Ohio State summer, so let's not chalk that up as a surefire win, especially with Julian Sain making his first start in that rivalry. But there's a legit chance that this Michigan team goes 11-1, 10-2, and finds themselves to the college football playoff. So huge kind of swing game for both these teams in their season. USC has a much tougher schedule after this. They have the Notre Dame games next week. And then they still have, pulling up the schedule now, a bunch of tough games coming up. At Nebraska is a tough one, and they have to go to Oregon as well. I think the winner of this one puts themselves in a pretty comfortable position to go to the playoff. The loser, though, is going to have a bit of an uphill climb. So huge game. I think maybe like the game with the most meaning behind it this entire week, Joe. But I'm going to go USC at home. I think this is their statement Big Ten win. Really struggled in these games last year against these bigger, stronger opponents. Illinois kind of pushed them around earlier a couple of weeks ago this season. I think USC comes out, has their best game so far of their Big Ten tenure, and wins this one 31-24. USC minus 2.5, over 57.5. There's my play for that one. All right, let's go to the Big 12 for our final game of the week before we head over to our dog of the day and our lock of the week. Number 21, Arizona State at 4-1, at Utah, number 4-1 as well, 10:15 on ESPN. Utah minus 5.5, over-under is 48.5.
I'm going with Utah here. I'm going with Utah kind of big as well. 31-17. I will take the Utes minus the 5.5. I accidentally wrote down Arizona State plus 5.5. I'm going to go with the Utes minus the 5.5. This is a game purely that reminds me of back when they were in the Pac-12 and they would have to host Oregon. And Oregon would be hyped up, big bad Oregon, probably going to win the Pac-12, go into the playoff. And they'd have to go play at Utah at night, and the Utes would just come out and smoke them. And this is a game, I think, Arizona State going to Utah. It's, I believe, 8:15. It leaves Utah's Mountain Time at 8:15 local kick. It'll be a night game. Those fans will be going crazy. We saw it with BYU, and they can't drink. They're the Mormons. Utah, I believe the Utes they're non-Mormons. Mormons probably still go there, but they'll be drinking all day. It'll be a great environment. I think Utah is going to get a big win here, put themselves back into the top 25, put themselves back firmly into the Big 12 title race. I'm going to go with the Utes minus 5.5, and I'm going to take the under by the hook. That's a total I'll probably stay away from, but I'm going to go with Utah.
I'm going with Utah too, but this is such a game that I'm not going to be surprised at all, Joe, if it comes down to the wire, if it comes down to a field goal. So I'm going to take Arizona State plus the 5.5 at home to keep it within the number. I'm going to go 24-21 Utah, though. Utah to get the win, Arizona State cover. Do like the under. I think you kind of touched on it. This is such a tough environment to go into at night. I think these two teams know each other pretty well, but Arizona State's not going to be afraid of this environment with Kenny Dillingham. I think he gets that team ready to go every single week. And then when you got Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson, all the big games that those two dudes played in last year, they're not going to be afraid of this moment. But I just think Utah, it's kind of a gotta-have-it one here at home for the win. But I do like Arizona State to keep it within that cover. I think this one comes down to a field goal at the end. All right, let's finish up, Joe. Dog of the day and lock of the week. Last week, you hit on your dog, Maryland. And hand up, I thought Maryland won the game. I didn't know until like Tuesday afternoon that what's it called? Who they even play? Washington came back and won that outright. And then my dog was Cal. I think they were up 14-0 on Duke, and they wound up losing like 45-24 or something. So was a pretty crazy flip there, but hit on Maryland. Really like that play with you. And then I believe you fell in your lock of the week. Yeah, you had Louisville last week. So after the red hot start, 0-2 the last 2 weeks, Joe, it's time for you to get back on the horse for your lock of the week. My lock of the week, Georgia minus 20.5 at home versus Kentucky. They won by 21. They were up 28 late. Kentucky scored with a few seconds left, but still got the cover there. So we split there 1-1 on the week. But who's your dog of the day this week?
My dog of the day, I really didn't like a whole lot on the board, but I'm going to go with Boston College plus 14.5 at home versus Clemson. I know Clemson had a bye week. Or no, they played UNC last week. They had a bye week 2 weeks ago. That just shows you how sad that is, and all the stuff about Bill Belichick wants to take the buyout. That's a real sad story going on over at UNC. But I'm going to take Boston College plus the 14.5 here against Clemson. I just think that Clemson is just so dead. Even if they end up winning the game by 30, like whoop-de-doo, I'll go with Boston College plus the 14.5 for my dog of the day. There wasn't a whole lot that was speaking to me when I was looking at the dogs this week. Maybe Auburn plus 3.5 at home against Georgia. I don't know though. But that's gonna be my dog of the day, the Boston College Eagles plus 14.5 in a night game up at Chestnut Hill.
Yeah, we can certainly see that for sure. The last week maybe it just said more about the state of UNC than it actually did about this Clemson team. But I'm gonna go with my dog of the day, Temple plus 9.5 at home against Navy. Won outright last week at home against UTSA as a 6.5 point underdog this week, their homecoming week. I feel like there's actually for Temple, there's a little bit of a legitimate buzz about this program and kind of what they've been able to do so far in this era under Casey Keeler. Homecoming game probably going to be, other than that Oklahoma game, their biggest crowd of the year. And they've been stingy. They've been a tough team thus far early in the season to keep it under 10 points. I think that they can do that and maybe even have a chance to win this one outright. Navy, obviously a tough team to prepare for with that triple option attack. They do throw the football a little bit more now than they used to. But Temple, their offense has been really dynamic. And as I said, they've been a tough, stingy little group so far. I'm going to take them, might be a little bit of home bias, but take them plus 9.5 at home against Navy for my dog this week. All right, Joe, how about your lock of the week? As we said, started out really hot, 0-2 your last week. I think you're due this week. What's your play?
Yeah, my lock of the week. I'm hoping to reset the mentals here. I am going with SMU. They're at home against the Stanford Cardinal. I am going with SMU minus 19.5. That is a 9 a.m. body clock game for Stanford. A Stanford team that I don't think is very good. I don't think that's a Woj bomb. I don't think a lot of people are out there sitting there saying, well, no, the Stanford team is legit. I don't think they're very good. They needed to beat San Jose State by a point. They beat Boston College. They have a win in the ACC. They just got, I saw, a $50 million donation today. I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to affect their chances on the football field against SMU. A lot of people are, kind of forgetting about SMU after that 2-2 start. They won their first game in the ACC against Syracuse. They should, knock on wood, beat Stanford here. They'll be 2-0 in the ACC. They got at Clemson, at Wake Forest. Then they got a big one against Miami. Who knows? If they right the ship, they might be sitting there. They're 3-2 right now. Maybe sitting at 6-2 heading into that game hosting Miami. Tough loss in the rivalry game at TCU. They lost that wild game against Baylor 48-45 in double overtime. But I still like this SMU team. Kevin Jennings is still a lot of fun to watch. That being said, I'm going with them to cover the 19.5 against Stanford and blow them out of the water. I believe it's homecoming as well out there in Dallas. But noon game, I think they'll get it done against Stanford.
Yeah, they have that SMU team has Miami coming up as well. Have that one highlighted for sure. My Hurricanes have to go down in that one. All right, my lock of the week this week, I'm going to go with a high total. Arkansas, Tennessee over 68.5. These are two of the top scoring offenses in the entire country. Arkansas, I believe, is 34th in points per game. Tennessee, third in points per game in the country. These are two teams that can go back and forth, scoring each other. And Tennessee's defense was super strong last year. Haven't been really great this year thus far. A few of their big games, they've given up quite a bunch of points, and Arkansas hasn't been able to stop anyone the entire year. They just fired their coaching staff, so they basically got a bunch of new guys in on the fly. Bobby Petrino basically got rid of the entire defensive staff. He kind of is bringing his own guys in on the fly. How good can they be to prepare against this Tennessee team on 1 week after that bye week last week against after the Notre Dame game? So Arkansas, Tennessee over 68.5. I think we see this one a shootout, like a 45 to 31 type of ball game, something kind of in that ballpark. So, Joe, that'll do it for this week's Beef Upfront College Football Picks and Preview. As we said, upsetting to see it already be 7 weeks done, but we're just getting into the thick of things. Games matter more and more every week, and we got a bunch of great ones this week. Looking forward to watching all these games this weekend. But thank you, as always, for everyone for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe, and we'll talk next week.